Welcome to the Grant Writing Simplified podcast. This is the place to learn how to make a big impact in your community through grant writing and nonprofit consulting. The world needs you to step forward as a grant writer and use your skills to lead with confidence. I'm Teresa Huff, former special ed teacher turned grant writer and nonprofit strategist. In my 20 years of freelancing, I've helped nonprofits triple their funding and exponentially increase their reach. Now I'm stepping up to mentor freelancers and nonprofit leaders like you who are ready to take your skills to the next level. It's time to get intentional about your vision so you can create lasting change in your community. Learn the skills and strategies you need to become the grant writer the world needs. Let's do this. Hey friends, welcome back. Are you ready to unleash your skills to make a massive impact? Then let's get you on the fast track. The Fast Track to Grant Writer is a 90-day VIP small group coaching experience where you'll learn how to be the go-to grant writer in your community. This is everything the books won't tell you. It's a combination of go-at-your-own-pace learning and individualized support and accountability from me and other like-minded grant writers. Seriously, it's like Miracle-Gro for grant writers. Let's fast-track your income and your impact in 2022. You can start today at teresahuff.com/VIP. The last couple of weeks, we've been talking about challenge questions to ask yourself and also some things to consider before you set any goals. You can go back and catch those in episodes 73 and 74. There are some things you really need to think about before you jump into goal setting. Today, I want to share with you an article from Fast Company. I've kind of been rolling it around in my mind ever since I read it. The article is called Rethinking Constraints as a Catalyst for Innovation. And the headline says, constraints force us to get crystal clear about the problem we're solving. This concept has really been on my mind the last couple of weeks, especially as we've been a couple of years now into a pandemic, a lot of changes, a lot of unknowns. And I got to thinking about this, of how true it is. And maybe we don't fully appreciate the value of constraints sometimes. I mean, think about it. Remember back in college when you just remembered the night before a term paper or a big assignment was due? Somehow you pulled it together and you managed to get it done in time. Or if someone texts and says, hey, I'm going to drop by your house in 5 minutes while I'm in the neighborhood. You magically have the energy to tidy up real quick before they get there. So those constraints can really force us to take focused action and redetermine our priorities in a way that we wouldn't have otherwise. However, constraints can also be frustrating, especially in the nonprofit world. I get that. We're often short on time, money, staff, and other types of resources. And with grant writers, sometimes there's a lack of information available. We're trying to communicate with the organization to get the data we need. We're trying to write within word count limits. And let me tell you, those word counts have made me a much better writer all around. As painful as they are sometimes, I have learned to make every character count. Not just every word, but sometimes it really comes down to a space. You can go back to episode 16 if you want some really specific examples. In the blog post there, I give you a chart showing you how you can really focus on writing tight. But because of constraints, we learn to adapt more quickly when we have to. As these last couple of years have shown us, we've been forced to, so we roll with it. Those confines force us to look for more creative solutions and explore alternatives that we wouldn't have otherwise even considered. The thing about constraints is they bring us to a sort of crossroads. It's almost a crisis of decision. We can either give up and walk away, we can give in to the status quo and just ride the wave, or we can step up and imperfectly find a creative way to a better solution. We can make imperfect progress and go much further because of it. In thinking this through, I want to share 3 tips for reframing our constraints. Now, these tips are loosely based on the Fast Company article that I mentioned, but I've adapted these specifically for nonprofit work and grant writing. And I will link to the article, of course, in the show notes. But let's think through, how can we reframe our constraints instead of being frustrated? How can we actually take those and use those to propel us forward? Number 1, listen to your people and thoughtfully consider their feedback. Now, in this case, it might be your team, your clients, your donors, your mentors, your volunteers. Depending on if you're a grant writer or if you're working with a nonprofit, that role may be different. But whoever your people are in your circles, listen to them and think about what they're telling you. Not just in and out of, oh, that won't work, or no, we can't do that anymore. But really take some time to reflect, to sit with those concepts, to sit with the ideas, to look for patterns and themes in the feedback they're giving you. Look for the frustrations. How can you solve some of the problems? And how you can use that to creatively come up with new ideas. Number 2, leverage your resources. Most grant writers and nonprofits are sitting on a gold mine of resources that they don't even realize. And this is why I'm so passionate about helping people in the fast track to grant writer and also working with nonprofits in strategy calls. Because when we start digging into this in our calls, they are always amazed at what's right in front of them. I mean, I do the same thing. Sometimes we just need a mirror to reflect things back to us. We might know 90% of what we're capable of or the resources we have, but it's connecting those dots that really makes the difference in stepping it up. I was on a strategy call this week with a nonprofit leader. She was telling me about some of the constraints, and she didn't know of anyone to talk to help tap into her network. Then she was telling me about some of their programs and some of the people who had been involved. And I said, do you hear what you just said? Do you hear who is coming to these meetings and who's involved with these programs? You have an amazing network right in front of you. She just hadn't considered it in that way. She hadn't looked at it as an asset that she could actually use, of people who already care about their mission deeply and would want to help promote it. Number 3, where can you prioritize, eliminate, offload, or redesign? Where can you prioritize, eliminate, offload, or redesign? In other words, think about what's your path of highest impact, and then what's a distraction that keeps you from making as much of an impact. By prioritizing, you can figure out what things can you eliminate, what things can you offload to someone else that you don't need to be doing, and offloading may also mean setting up a process or a tech system to be able to outsource that work. I talked about this back in episode 63, where I challenge you to look at your systems and where can you offload to a system? Where can you hire a system to help you with your work? The hard part about this question of prioritize, eliminate, offload, or redesign is that we can often have lots of good things in front of us, but sometimes we have to let go of some of the good in order to really focus on the great and grow more exponentially. That's called strategic abandonment, and it takes courage, and it's hard, but it's well worth the process. It's a refinement. It's not perfect. It's not an exact science. It's like grant writing. It's a combination of an art and a science, but we need a mix of both. Constraints can feel like a drain or a drag sometimes. They're not ideal, and they usually aren't what we would have chosen for ourselves or for our organization. But if we can learn to reframe those constraints into opportunities for creativity, they can actually become the catalysts for some of our greatest work. Where do you feel constrained right now in your life or your work or your goals? And how can you reframe those constraints as an opportunity to innovate? Sometimes those containers are actually helpful because they set some parameters that we can challenge, but we can also define how we want to move forward and how we want to improve in spite of those constraints. If you're ready to explore this further, head to teresahuff.com/quiz and take my free quiz, Do You Have What It Takes to Be a Grant Writer? People are always surprised at how many skills they already have for grant writing, and the distance isn't nearly as far as they thought. Let's help you figure out how you can use your constraints to your advantage so you can help change your world. All right, friends, I wanted to give you that food for thought this week. I'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback about it. So connect with me over on LinkedIn. Come find me there and let's continue the conversation. Have a great week, and I'll see you next time.